Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Peter Salerno, and in this video we are going to explore the history and the diagnosis we now know as narcissistic personality disorder. Although I'm new to regularly posting on YouTube, I've been sharing this work on other platforms for years. I've seen everything from curiosity and appreciation to criticism and even personal attacks and threats, often from people who believe that new research is dangerous simply because it challenges older familiar theories. But psychology, like any other science, should never stop testing ideas. We would never halt cancer research simply because older methods seemed good enough. In the same way, mental health deserves the best evidence we can find, drawing from neuroscience, behavioral genetics, and modern technology, while also respecting the valuable contributions of earlier theories. My background spans both worlds. I trained extensively in psychoanalytic and attachment-based approaches before expanding into the biological and data-driven sciences. I'm here to share that integrated perspective, not to dismiss anyone's work, but to add to the conversation and to keep it moving forward. So with that in mind, let's dive into the fascinating story of how the concept of narcissism evolved from mythology to modern clinical understanding. A lot of people think that narcissism is a modern psychological term, but its roots stretch back all the way to ancient Greek mythology. So in this video, I'm going to trace the journey of narcissism from a poetic metaphor to a formal psychiatric diagnosis. I'm also going to uncover how outdated ideas still shape the way we see it today. The name comes from Narcissus, described as a stunningly beautiful youth who fell in love with his own reflection, ignoring all who loved him. In the myth, that self-obsession becomes his undoing. This poetic image became cultural shorthand for extreme self-focus. Early psychologists and mental health professionals borrowed this, using myth and literature to explain mental illness. The problem is, it's a metaphor, not a measurement. Even Shakespeare hinted at something much more complex: nature and nurture working together, not against each other. In 1898, British physician and sexologist Havelock Ellis used the term Narcissus-like to describe adolescent boys preoccupied with masturbation. He equated sexual self-focus with self-interest. This was a leap without evidence, shaped more by moral and cultural attitudes of his time than by science. A year later, German psychiatrist Paul Näcke used the concept of narcissism to describe what he considered a sexual perversion, self-directed eroticism. In 1911, Otto Rank took this concept beyond sexuality, tying narcissism to feminine vanity and creative expression, not as a mental illness, but as a personality and artistic tendency. Then came Freud. In 1914, he proposed two forms: primary narcissism, a normal stage in infancy when the self is the center of the world, and secondary narcissism, which is pathological, and it occurs when emotional energy is withdrawn from relationships and reinvested in the self. Freud preferred to and intentionally kept psychology separate from biology. So his model was very rich in metaphor, but very light on data. In fact, he's even quoted as saying, "I try in general to keep psychology clear from everything that is different in nature from it, even biological lines of thought." By the late 1960s, Otto Kernberg described narcissistic personality structure marked by pathological grandiosity, envy, and exploitation, rooted in early relationships, especially a lack of maternal empathy or warmth in infancy. Heinz Kohut took a different view. For Kohut, narcissism develops when parents or caregivers refuse to mirror a child's emotional worth, or when they overindulge them, at any point before puberty. Kohut introduced the now popular idea that narcissists are secretly fragile, hiding low self-esteem behind grandiosity. Both models were compelling, neither was supported by rigorous research. And in real life, that vulnerability often only appears in clinical settings, especially when the life of a narcissist falls apart, while elsewhere those same narcissists can present as highly confident and dominant. That's not to say that narcissists cannot experience vulnerability, so I want to make that very clear. Until the 1980s, theories on narcissism came from anecdotal case notes, patients' stories interpreted from the clinician's personal, subjective lens. Correlation was mistaken for causation. It's like the old ulcer theory, blaming ulcers on stress until scientists discovered the bacterium H. pylori. In the same way, many clinicians still cling to the idea that childhood trauma or childhood ruptures in attachment cause narcissism. even though consistent evidence is lacking. In 1980, the DSM-3 officially recognized narcissistic personality disorder, with diagnostic criteria based on observable behavior, not just theory. Later editions like the DSM-5 and DSM-5 text revision refined these descriptions and introduced a dimensional model, looking at personality traits and severity on a continuum or spectrum. Even with better tools, many clinicians still favor trauma-only based theories, partly because admitting that theories need to expand and that we don't know everything can be uncomfortable for a lot of people. But that resistance has consequences: less effective treatment and growing public skepticism about psychology as a science. Unlike depression or PTSD, personality disorders are not episodic and they are not a cluster of symptoms. They are built on enduring personality traits that are characteristic, not episodic, with strong heritable components. This explains the stability, consistency, and inflexibility of these traits across the lifespan. We're not talking about symptoms or episodes here. We're talking about an enduring and pervasive characteristic condition. So it really is not the case that narcissists are just fragile victims in disguise, even though that is a popularly held idea. They have long-standing personality structures that consistently distort reality, exploit others, and have little empathy. They are grandiose, and they can be highly manipulative, and they use other people for self-enhancement purposes, not for reciprocal relationships. Today, behavioral genetics, neuroscience, and long-term studies are reshaping what we know about narcissism. This is how psychology grows, by replacing myth and metaphor with measurable fact. When we understand narcissism through evidence, not just outdated theory, we can avoid the traps of clinical dogma and hopefully one day develop effective treatments so that we can reduce the threat of narcissism in our lives and in the world. So here's a chart that shows the evolution of clinical accuracy related to narcissism. We go back to 1898 with Havelock Ellis, linked to adolescent masturbation and self-absorption. The empirical support, there isn't any. It's purely speculative or anecdotal. It's based on moral and cultural bias rather than scientific validation. Then we move to a year later with Paul Näcke, classified narcissism as sexual perversion. There's no empirical support for this. It's purely speculative or anecdotal. It's rooted in early sexology pathologizing, and there's no research basis. In 1911, Otto Rank associated narcissism with feminine vanity and artistic expression. Certainly untrue. There's no empirical support for it. It's culturally interpretive without clinical evidence. It offers cultural insight but no empirical testing. 1914, Sigmund Freud introduced primary or universal narcissism versus secondary pathological narcissism. It's theoretical only. It's conceptually influential but untested. It's based on psychoanalytic theory, not systematic study. And whether we like it or not, once Freud's methods were tested, very little empirical support has been found for his ideas. 1960s and 70s, Otto Kernberg described narcissism as rooted in early maternal coldness and empathy deficits. There's really weak evidence for this, even though it's highly popular. Partially supported, but inconsistent. There's some observational support, but no controlled studies. In 1971, Heinz Kohut, the founder of self-psychology, talks about narcissism as stemming from a lack of parental mirroring or overindulgence. There really is no empirical support for this. It's clinically plausible, but it's unverified. And it's a very compelling model, but again, lacks empirical confirmation. In 1980, the third edition of the DSM described behavioral diagnostic criteria for NPD. For the first time, we have foundational observable data. It's empirically structured, but in the early stages, so it's based mostly on clinical consensus and observable traits. And then in 2013, the DSM-5, and then in 2022, the DSM-5 text revision introduced the dimensional trait-based model of personality disorders. There is growing research support that is evidence-based and improving. It's supported by trait research, but it's still refining operationalization. So what we don't want to do, and what I get accused of doing often, which is not true, is throwing out everything that we've known beforehand related to theories and their contributions. That's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to expand upon them and build upon them so that we have more of a comprehensive understanding in related fields. If you found this history as fascinating as I do, please consider picking up my book, The Nature and Nurture of Narcissism, where I deep dive into the science and myth of personality disorders. Please consider watching other videos on this channel, and I would also highly encourage you to leave comments, but I would please ask that you respectfully leave them. And if you have questions or disagreements, please be respectful in requesting clarification. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. I'm Dr. Peter Salerno, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.